You're listening to the Chain Clankers podcast with your hosts, Quentin Ferris and Horatio Gonzalez. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Chain Clankers. Welcome in, everyone, to the Chain Clankers podcast. I'm your host, Quentin Ferris, here joined, as always, with Horatio Gonzalez. We got a great episode for you guys today. A little bit different than what we've kind of been doing over the last month or so. We've been doing a whole lot of interviews, so we thought we wanted to at least take a week, kind of step away from that, and we're going to talk to you guys about some really interesting things that, honestly, before I even did any research for this episode, I truly had no idea about how disc golf got started, the evolution of disc golf, the growth of disc golf, and what could potentially be the future for disc golf. That's kind of what we wanted to talk to you guys today. And I think it's really interesting. It's going to be a really fun listen, and I'm honestly super excited for the episode. Horatio, how are we doing today, and what are your thoughts on today's show?
I'm excited about today's. I think it's a lot of information that maybe a lot of people didn't know and maybe could get excited about the sport and to help grow it, share it with other people, and something to when you go and talk to someone you don't know and they ask you about it, you can tell them about how much it's growing and how much the sport has grown these last few years, and then that way they don't think it's just a joke. I know, like a lot of people I tell when I play disc golf, they laugh at me. I'm like, this is a pretty legit thing, and it's only getting bigger. So,
yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's kind of what we want to have happen with today's episode. We want to continue the trend of turning disc golf into something that is just a joke, or, you're just out there drinking or smoking or doing whatever you're doing, into this is actually a legitimate sport, and this is something that is continuing to grow. I mean, we just had it on the CBS coverage, and I imagine we'll get into that a little bit today as well. So, let's just go ahead. Let's start off with the history of disc golf. I truly had no idea when disc golf started. If you're not following us on Instagram, you absolutely have to follow us on Instagram. It's just at Chain Clankers. Got a lot of great info going up over there, and we had a story up the other day. It was, when was the first game of disc golf? Now, keyword in that sentence is the first game of disc golf. The first game of disc golf was in 1927. Tournaments and things like that didn't really start happening until the 60s or 70s, but I was absolutely shocked. 1927, Horatio, can you believe that before the Second World War, really during the Depression, people were out there clanking some damn chains?
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind, that is pretty crazy, like 100 years ago. But when it started, it was a very different sport than what we're used to now. They played more for targets. They didn't really have the chains and the basket that we're used to now. You'd go out there to a park or whatever, and you would score points based off of targets that you hit. So it could be a trash can, a fire hydrant, a pole, or whatever it was, and that's kind of how you were scoring. And that became a problem really quickly, because if you were from far away and you threw your disc and you thought it hit it and people disagreed with you, there was really no way to figure out if you actually hit that and scored points or not, which is why the basket was created.
Yeah, which is super interesting, because it's really one of those things where it's like, nowadays, when you throw a disc and you hit like a tree, for example, I know one of the phrases I've started saying a whole lot is, oh, well, that disc is never going to fly the same, because it is true. As you beat in a disc, as you hit more objects with it, its flight will alter a little bit. But back in the day, that is what the goal was. The goal was to just randomly hit things. There weren't really even chains, like you were saying. There weren't really baskets. So it's super interesting how that just kind of changed into what it is today, and really how that has affected disc golf overall. And, I kind of want to talk about how disc golf first kind of started up. So the DGA was founded in 1976. The sport was already moving quickly in there. Steady Ed is pretty much known as the father of disc golf. He installed the first official disc golf course at Oak Grove Park in Los Angeles, California. The targets, like we were talking about a little bit earlier, they didn't have the chains and all that yet, but they were just merely permanent poles that were placed into the ground. And these poles were then later replaced with, other things such as baskets, or, maybe a little wider of a pole or things like that. But there was an overwhelmingly successful tournament, the World Frisbee Championships in 1975, that really kind of propped disc golf up and made it something that was potentially about to become something really big. And that's really what happened, because in the 70s, we saw a whole lot of ultimate frisbee, and that's really what people were watching. But this was the first time we saw, disc golf on the world scale. Horatio, you want to talk a little bit about the impacts of that and maybe how that has transitioned us into a little bit of where we are today?
Yeah, so talking about championships and tournaments, I think that's one of the things that really legitimizes sports for a lot of people. I know we were talking the other day about how a lot of the people we've interviewed, every time we asked them about how they started playing or when they started playing, so many of them had said 2016. I started playing disc golf in 2016. And so I went to go look on YouTube and other places and just searched up disc golf 2016, and that was the championship where Paul Macbeth and Wysocki, and they played in the pros in the champion US DG championship and the Pro Masters. And it was like some of the really big championships that were aired and a lot of people first watched. So I think that brought a huge, massive new players to the game. And I think it's continuing to do that. And that's why they focus on airing these championships and tournaments on TV. And Jomez, what they do for the sport is enormous. They're like completely changing the game. So I think back in the day, those championships that people played, people were like, wow, this is a really competitive sport. It's not just going out and playing with a bunch of guys and just goofing off, it's a little more serious than that.
Yeah, and that was really the first time we saw it on a world scale. And moving forward past that, we really I guess the big association that at least I think is the most legitimate for disc golf right now is the Pro Disc Golf Tour, the PDGA. All those things. So Steady Ed, as they called him, pretty much again the founder of disc golf. He founded the Professional Disc Golf Association, and in 1976, he sent out a letter to roughly 100 of the top players in the country, inviting them to join the PDGA. The cost would be about $10, which would be 45 in today's money for a lifetime membership. He then began directly selling memberships to the players at tournaments all over the country. And this was really big in growing the sport. And, he was going around saying, oh, it's $10 a pop and you'll be in there for life. And, you see these guys like, even Paul Macbeth, for example, he's like, and I'm just guessing, I don't have it pulled up in front of me right now, but like his PDGA number is like 40,237, like, imagine being one of those guys who had PDGA number 23, that's something that's really,
Yeah,
really special. And it's really cool to see those players who have the smaller numbers. It just shows, how early on they were into disc golf. And a big thing that I think is not talked about a whole lot today that really helped legitimize disc golf in the 70s was the Whammo's 50,000 disc golf tournament. And this was held in California. Whammo Company was the sponsorship of this, and the event had a $50,000 payout. I mean, that was just absolutely massive. And I think it showed, I mean, obviously it was a massive success and, it was really, really good for disc golf. But to me, it's one of those things where it shows that a corporate sponsor can really, truly help disc golf continue to grow. And at this point in disc golf, I believe a corporate sponsor is going to be necessary for disc golf to have continued growth. We saw how good it was in the 70s. Horatio, do you agree with that statement that disc golf ultimately will need to pick up a corporate sponsor? For example, if you watch the Joe Mez coverage, you might have seen the videos where the first 24 hours was ad-free because Arby's was sponsoring their video. Does disc golf need a corporate sponsor to come in to help further the game along into, something closer to maybe professional golf on TV or just a professional sport in general on TV? What are your thoughts on that?
absolutely. One of the articles that I was reading on just the growth and the change of the sport and how much it's growing, it said, can it replace regular golf, ball golf? And the article was talking about at the rate it's going, it could, but it's going to have hurdles, it's going to have challenges. And for it to do so and to be able to overtake regular golf, it talked about three things that disc golf needed to have in order to make that next big step. The first one was buy in from public institutions. The second one was greater media coverage. And the last one was private money. So that Arby's coverage and them sponsoring that 24 hours of Joe Mess, that's kind of like that first initial of private money coming in from corporation. They see how popular sport is getting. They see what it can be, and they're starting to invest. They're going to see how it goes. They're going to see if they can get a return on their money. So I think after other companies see people like Arby's, it's like a competitive thing. They're going to say, well, why aren't we sponsoring these tournaments, or why aren't we doing anything if there's some chance of getting a return on our money? Because it's all about money for big corporations. So I think once we see a lot more companies, that's going to kind of be that that flip where the game is just going to absolutely take off. And because the other two, the media coverage and public institutions, I mean, when we went to Emporia, we saw one of the high schools, they had a 18 hole on their campus, and so when schools and colleges start to have courses or they start to teach disc golf as a part of the sport, that's going to really take off also because it's going to grow an entire new generation of players from middle school and continue to grow the sport that way. And then media coverage, I mean, Joe Mess right now is kind of, you have GQ Productions and you have a couple other pages on YouTube who cover tournaments, but Jomez is absolutely dominating the arena for that. And being on CBS was a huge, huge moment for disc golf. So I think all of those things, we're starting to kind of see them really kind of come together. And I think that is a good sign of where the sport is going.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I agree with the fact that disc golf is going to need that corporate sponsor. I mean, could you imagine if somebody like Nike dropped in and let's say they throw $1 million into disc golf right now? That would allow professional disc golfers, not just Paul Macbeth, Ricky Wysocki, Kevin Jones, not just those massive big name guys. That would allow guys like, for example, some folk who we've interviewed before, Thomas Gilbert, Logan Harpool, those guys and other guys like them to be able to be on tour, be able to be professional disc golfers, and be able to have success in the sport much more than without that corporate sponsor. It means there's higher payouts. You're not living out of your van. You can still travel, live in your van traveling if you want to do that, but you're not struggling and thinking, where the hell am I going to get my next check from? If I don't play good in this tournament and there's not another tournament for 2 weeks, what am I going to do? A corporate sponsor would alleviate that pressure and would make disc golf so much more. It would allow for companies to be able to sponsor more players, I believe, as well. I mean, Paul Macbeth has the highest contract in disc golf. I want to say it's around $1 million for 4 years. Compare that to literally any other sport, and that's chump change. I mean, that's not very good. So I do believe that disc golf really does need that. But kind of moving along a little bit in the history, really from the 80s we just saw disc golf continuing to grow. Ratings was introduced in the 90s, I believe, and that really kind of changed things as well. And the world championships coming around, that massively helped disc golf's growth. But talking about the history of disc golf and the growth, I think it's very important to look at that 2016, that Horatio, you mentioned it earlier. At 2015 there was about 30,000 members, but at the end of 2016 there was about 87,000 members. So there was a massive growth around there. And you talked a little bit already about potentially why that was, so I don't want to delve too much further. But what I want to talk about instead is the active members 10 years prior to that. In 2005, the active members was only 9,600. So in a decade,
Yeah.
we saw a massive growth, and we'll get into it a little bit later. I don't want to talk about it just yet, but we've got some ideas for maybe why that growth will happen again going into the next decade throughout the 20s this century. But also looking at the events from 1999 to 2015. In 99 there were 335 disc golf events going on, but in 2015 there was almost 2,600 events. That's a massive change in 15, 16 years. And the more events allows there to be more competition, more disc golfers playing, more opportunity for those corporate sponsors to come in and those kinds of things. So I think it's really, really critical. And so now where we're at a really special place, in my opinion. We're at a place where disc golf is still very young. It's almost trying to stand up on 2 feet and walk and run for the first time in its life, if you want to compare it to a child. But I think that right now, if well, I don't want to continue to say, but if they get the corporate sponsor, that's going to be critical. But I think there's a couple other things that would make disc golf a little bit better for the mainstream, and how we can evolve it into becoming something that is maybe more watched than ball golf. And something that I want to sit down here is the major disc golf events. So these really big tournaments that, if you've never really looked before, you probably wouldn't know about it. I know didn't really necessarily know about it also. But so next year in 2021, we've got the schedule for most of them. It looks like the only thing that is not scheduled yet is the national championship. So for 2021, the big major events for we've got, the first one is the United States Women's Disc Golf Championship. Then we've got the Amateur Disc Golf Championship. And the first one is in late May. That second one is in early June. Late June, we've got the Professional Disc Golf World Championships. Now, this is really interesting that the World Championships is happening in June, but listen to everything that's after that. The European Open is July 14th through the 18th. The Professional Disc Golf World Championships are June 22nd through the 26th. The Masters Disc Golf World Championships is 3rd through the 7th. That doesn't really matter a whole lot for the guys that were watching on TV, but we see the USDGC in October 6th through the 8th. So to me, that's one of those things where, why is the World Championships being held in early June, and then the United States Championship in early October? You know what I mean? Because me, still being someone who's very new to the sport, only been in the sport for about 6 months, but it doesn't make much sense to me to have the World Championships in the middle of June and then have the United States Championship at the end of October. I believe that that should not necessarily be inversed, but we should continue to push back those big tournaments, those majors, as you would call them, to later on in the year. Because if I'm a disc golfer and I am playing at the World Championships in late June, and I do really well, what's really the point after that? You know what I mean? Like, okay, the European Open's there, okay, the United States Championship is there, but in my opinion, the World Championship is the number one thing in disc golf. That's the number one thing you're working towards. In every other sport, there's almost like a certain order in them, except maybe for ball golf. But the thing that ball golf has, in my opinion, is that they have those majors. They have defined majors. You know, the GBO, is that a defined major? Is the Waco Invitational, is that a major? Is, you know, the Ledgestone, is that a major? What are those? Are those just tour, I guess, tournaments? You know what I mean? I think disc golf, the big argument that I'm trying to make here is I think disc golf needs to move to having majors like the ball golf has. And, you know, they've got the Masters, they've got the US Championships, they've got the European Open, they've got the PDGA or the PGA Championship. So I think that disc golf needs to have something along those lines where they have like 6 or 7 majors, or, you know, we know what they are, and they're going in order to that October timeframe being the World Championships, and that's when it's over, in my opinion, because the World Championships, in my opinion, should be the last tournament in disc golf. Horatio, I know I just spoke for a long time. Hopefully everyone's still listening and they were able to follow that argument. Talk to me about what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with my take there that the World Championship should be moved back? We should have more defined majors in disc golf, and that would actually help legitimize the sport and evolve it and take it to the next level.
Is that the June one? Is that usually when it is, or is that maybe have something to do with COVID and then it having to be pushed back some? I'm looking at it right now, and I guess it's July, September, August. So they looks like they change it up some, but it's usually in that late summer, early fall. And I wonder if that just has something to do with the weather, and
Mm-hmm.
whether that's maybe like when the best, since it's a world championship, when maybe that's when it's the best for everyone, on doesn't matter what time zone you are, and when people are able to get together as far as their schedules, people coming from Europe, Japan, wherever they come and play, if maybe that's just the ideal weather for the world championships. That's kind of the only thing I can think of. But I see what you're saying as to why you would have a world championship at the beginning and then play out the rest of the season. I guess it's kind of weird, but I think when they go on pro tour, that's kind of their majors, like you were talking about, or the events that they have prior to the worlds. Because right now they're playing the pro tour events, and so those are kind of taking titles here and there, and then they're building it up to the United States Championship, and then eventually they would go into the World Championship. But yeah, that's pretty interesting, and I don't know why that is exactly, but I think that would definitely help because you build up the drama of it and the excitement. People get to see their favorite players throughout the season, and then you get to see who comes to the Worlds as opposed to seeing it at the very beginning. And then,
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I completely agree with you. I think that that buildup will make it matter more. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I truly could not tell you what the pro tour points mean. You know what I mean? Like, I know they have to do with seating for, I think it's the USGGC, but I genuinely think that the pro tour points do not matter. They have really no effect on anything that I guess is so major. So I think that, in ball golf, you see the actual points that they're earning matter towards their tournaments. So I think that, I don't know, maybe the points mattering more, but I really do think that moving the world championship back later in the year, having some sort of buildup, having some sort of drama, having some battles would make it significantly better because to me as a player, I would not be interested in, getting hyped. Let's say you spend 2 weeks, if you're Paul Macbeth, you spend 2 weeks in the middle of June preparing for this world championship. How do you mentally then lock back in to the D-Glow 2 weeks after the world championships? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It just seems like such a big letdown, in my opinion, that I feel like moving that around a little bit could make it easier. And really, where I want to go with this whole massive conversation that we're having right now about moving this is that the CBS coverage that we got for the restart of the Disc Golf Pro Tour this year, I think that moving the worlds later on, making more majors and making them very defined in what they are, allows for companies like CBS, ESPN, Fox Sports, whomever, to pick up disc golf and be able to display it better, in my opinion. Because if you've got the World Championships in June, but then you've got the European Open in July, isn't the world championships more important? I don't know. Maybe I'm just stuck on a tangent on dates and it really is just more about, hey, the weather is better here. So, this is when we're going to play the tournament. But I guess where I want to move the conversation to is, what are your thoughts on CBS potentially picking up disc golf more? There's rumors that they could be doing more tournaments in 2021. What do you think the impact is of CBS picking up disc golf? What do you think needs to happen for more casual fans to watch that CBS coverage to get into disc golf, I guess?
I think it's really cool. I don't know if it needs to be CBS or whoever. I think it's really important for disc golf to be on that main level where people who maybe don't go and play, who just want to watch it, like just because it's on national television or whatever, like it doesn't need to be just for spectators who go and play the sport. How many people that watch football go and play football
I don't
during
play
the week
football.
or on the weekend?
No, I don't. I don't.
Probably 90% of the
Yeah.
people or
Nope.
less that watch football do not go play football. And
Nope.
how big is that sport? How much money do they bring in every year?
Massive.
Nobody
Billions.
plays. Yeah. And that's one cool thing about disc golf is you can play it during the week on the weekends and go watch it on the weekend or day after from Jomez. Or if it's on television, you can play it and you can go watch it and be like, wow, how are they so good? How are they watch the players? And like, it's amazing because you go out there during the week or on the weekends and you try to do it and you see how difficult it actually is. But I think that's why it's really cool for CBS to pick it up and show it to people because a lot of people were just needing any kind of sports. There was nothing on ESPN. And so it was like perfect timing because people that just want to watch competitive sports were able to tune in and check it out and to see this whole new sport, which then, because it's not as demanding on your body as a sport, you could then go and play. And so I think that's going to be one thing that is going to grow the sport even faster is people that don't really play sports and who watch it on TV and see it on national television and discover it for the first time are going to go watch and try it. So I think that'll be really important, but I don't think it needs to be CBS. I know people were complaining about Joe Mess doing that with CBS. That was like some comments I saw, and they're like, "Why are you guys doing this? You guys are successful because you started on YouTube. You need to focus on being a YouTube um, streaming company, basically. But you have to do other things to grow. Like you can't just be stuck in the same path. Otherwise, you're not going to grow."
No, I completely agree. And I do think that getting disc golf on TV will be more beneficial than just having it on the Pro Tour where you can watch live or Jomez, because Jomez is doing something that's incredible, right? But how long is that going to be sustainable to the point where disc golf actually becomes legitimized? Because I think that's kind of been the overarching topic of this episode is, how does disc golf get legitimized? The history of it a little bit, the evolution, where we are now. And I think that getting it on TV, getting in front of more people is what's going to allow for that the quickest, because, Joe Shuck over there could be like, oh, well, disc golf's for hippies, blah, 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 blah. You're just out there doing it. So blah, 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 blah. Disc golf's not sport, blah, blah, blah. But you see it on TV, automatically it's more legitimate in your head. And then you were, like you were saying, you can sit down, you can watch people play disc golf on TV and be like, how the heck do they do that? I want to be able to do that and then go out and play. Because in my opinion, the top sports that people go out and play are basketball, I guess regular ball golf, and then either soccer or disc golf, in my opinion. I think that's the main sports that people will watch on TV and then they'll go out and play. But basketball is easy because you can literally just have one person, you can just be shooting hoops, like whatever. Ball golf, a lot similar to disc golf. And we'll have a future episode on this about if disc golf should ever become pay to play. I've definitely got some strong opinions on that. I know you've got some opinions on that as well. But those two, you see a lot of people playing in soccer as well, just because of how big it is overall in the world. And, again, one
You
person
don't
can
need
go out
anything.
and
Yeah.
just shoot and play if they want. So really, it's one of those things where I think getting it on TV more allows it to be more legitimized. If you agree with me on that, let us know on Instagram, Twitter, even Facebook at Chain Clankers. Let us know your thoughts. Do you agree that getting it on TV will make disc golf more legitimate, will make more people look at disc golf as something that is a growing sport? Because I think that's kind of the big hurdle in people's minds, that once that happens, I mean, disc golf can just absolutely take off, in my opinion. And I've been saving this. I talked about it a little bit earlier. I've been saving this, but the whole COVID impact, I think, is the other big reason why disc golf is going to become more legitimized. Because you literally look at all the companies; they are selling out things very, very quickly. I mean, literally, for example, by the time you're listening to this, you're probably not going to be able to get a first run Hades anywhere on the interweb. Not going to be able to happen. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the Paul Macbeth Hades, the prototype, they came out with the first official run for it. It's no longer the prototype. It is the actual Hades. I know Horatio got one. I got one. So it's going to be pretty sick. We're definitely going to have to do a YouTube video on it for sure. But that's sold out. Cloudbreaker sold out in 3 minutes. There's another big disc that's sold out really quick. That is losing my mind. The mystery boxes from Discmania sold out very quick. If you listen to the Disc Golf Answer Man by Dynamic Discs, their podcast, they talk about how their warehouse, which is massive by the way, is very low on plastic because it just continues to sell and sell and sell and sell. And I know when I would go to disc golf shops, they would barely have anything there because people would continue to go out and buy, because during COVID, one of the only things that you could do is go out and play disc golf. So more people are out playing disc golf now than probably ever before. So I think that's really key into legitimizing the sport, getting more people out there playing, selling more plastic, because if those three things can happen, then I think disc golf is going to turn into something that is, I mean, when you drive by and you see a disc golf tournament, people are going to be like, oh, dang, wow, that's really cool. Instead of why are there so many people at the park today? You know what I mean? Does that make sense? What are your thoughts on that, Horatio? What do you think the big COVID impact is for disc golf, and maybe how that affects the future?
Yeah, I think all of that is really good points. And I think, but one thing to keep in mind, and I was reading about, is there was an influx of players and people because it was one of the few things that you could go outside and do, which even a lot of television networks, I know our local TV station did an interview with a couple of the local pros and stuff about disc golf because they were noticing how many people were playing. And they did one in Emporia, Kansas with Dynamic and a couple other places, which is because the sport was growing so much because everything was locked down and people were going out and playing like you were talking about. But same with everything being locked down, one of the things that were shut down were the factories. So a lot of the disc manufacturers had to shut down production for a while because of COVID. They were having to give their workers to stay home to quarantine and to just shut down for a period of time when the entire country was shut down in other places. So they were not able to make discs at all for a few weeks, some of them for a couple of months. So you have that not being able to make discs and manufacture anything for a few weeks or a couple months. And then you have this huge influx of players wanting to play and to do something outside because everything is shut down. And it just created the perfect bubble to burst at the right time. But now that everything is back on track, they're still not being able to keep up with demand. Innova and other companies had to grow their factories and get more machines to be able to produce more discs. And so it did not help it having to be shut down. But the amount of new players was just huge. And I'm very interested to see what the PDGA number for like next year will be at the end of next year, like what that number will be. Like if because we haven't gotten ours yet. And if we wait, like maybe we'll be like, I don't know, because what are they at right now? 800,000? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have it in front of me. Let me see if I can't maybe look that up real quick. I know, let's see here. I know it was something at least in the 87,000s, I think, is what we saw in 2016. Um, but regardless, I mean, I think I'll probably end up getting my PDGA number this up in, what would that be, 2021, I imagine, because I'll
Yeah.
be able to actually play more. I'll be out of college, I'll be able to play more tournaments, so I think it'll be much more valuable for me to get it then. But real quick, I want to get out of here on this very last thing. What do you think the percentage of people will be that tried disc golf during quarantine? What do you think that percentage of people will be that continue to play disc golf post quarantine, or post all this COVID stuff? Because there are reports that a vaccine will be ready in November, maybe a little bit after that. Do you think that it's going to be a high percentage? Because I think it's one of those things where, you do it for a little bit, it's fun, and then it's kind of like, well, now I can go do a bunch of other things, but I really did enjoy doing this. I know you started playing during quarantine. I started to get back into it during quarantine. I know a couple other people, same thing. I think that number is going to be, I want to say, I'm going to be positive. I want to say that number is going to be about 65%. So 65 out of every 100 people who picked up disc golf during quarantine is going to continue to play disc golf for, for however long, for the next couple of years, or they'll just continue to play disc golf. That, I think that's the number that I'm going to go with. I think 65% is a pretty good number. What do you think your number is?
I think mine would be even higher than that. I think I would say closer to 80% maybe. And I would do it on a smaller scale to understand maybe out of every 10 people that is introduced to the sport this year at least, 8 of those will continue to go on and play by themselves or continue to play. Because I'm really glad you asked that because I was going to talk about how every single person that I have introduced to the sport since I started playing has continued to play. They've gone out and bought their own discs. I've gone out with them to help them out buy their own discs. They continue to go play with me week after week. They've introduced other people to it, their significant others, and they're continuing to go and play, and they want to continue to go and play. But pretty much every person I've taken out wants to continue playing. And then if they bring out another 3 or 4 people, and even just 3 of those continue to play, that's where the sport's going to get really huge. And I think a lot of it's going to be like quarantine and COVID helped a lot of people discover it and helped a lot of people find the sport. But I think now it's going to be people are between TV, YouTube, and friends about hearing about it. It's just going to continue to grow because of the younger generation of the people who need stuff to do, who financially are not as well off as their parents or grandparents were when golf started and golf started taking off. Golf is expensive. Like I'll ask people that play golf or say golf is a lot, but regular golf is so much better than disc golf. And then I ask them how many times they've played this year. And they'll be like, oh, I've gone out to play 2 or 3 times. And they're happy with that, which is fine. But I want to get good at something. I want to go at least once a week or more than that. But when it's so expensive, you can't do that. And a lot of people that go, yeah, I'm going to go with my buddies and play around. It's usually them by themselves or a couple of friends. Disc golf, every time I go to a course, I see an entire family out there, which is sometimes annoying, but I'm glad they're out there with their kids.
Yeah.
But this is a family sport. You can take your kids out there. You can go spend an evening with your family. It's not, oh, I'm getting off on the weekend. I'm going to go get away from the fam. You can go spend time with your family, which is better, I think, than just having to, run away from your family or whatnot. Like
No, I agree. I
that's other issues.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you on that one. And another note that I just wanted to make on that before we get out of here is just that I thought that was really interesting about how, more younger people are getting into it. And, there are definitely debates to be had about that. The younger folk are worse off now than their parents and grandparents are left off. And it is free for now, except buying the discs and stuff like that. And you said some guys who play ball golf go 2 or 3 times a year. I mean, we go damn near 2 or 3 times a week or something like that to go and clank chains. So that's really important. And I also think, and I don't want to get too political, but I do think something that's important also is that this is a very green sport. This is something that is very. I mean, this is the best sport that you can have for the environment because the ability to make a disc golf course, you can just go put some chains in a park. You can just go put some chains in the woods. Yeah, sure, maybe you carve out just a little bit, but that's so much better for the environment than completely wiping it out and putting up like a basketball court, for example, or a tennis court or something like that. Like so I think disc golf is also very good in that aspect, that it is good for the environment. It gets
Yeah.
people outdoors, it brings people together. And I do think that, like you said, a lot of the people that you've taken out, I've taken a couple of buddies out as well, and they've, kind of sort of gotten into it as well. I think that is going to be what continues to grow the sport, continues to legitimize it, and more people will play. Because, I mean, literally look at our significant others. Never in 1,000 years would I have ever expected my girlfriend to go out and play and love disc golf. And she does.
Yeah.
And that is something that we get to spend 2 or 3 nights a week being able to get away from everything, turn our phones off, just be with each other and just, play. So I think that's really helpful. And I do think that disc golf is going to continue to grow. And I think it's only going to continue to get more legitimate. And hopefully this episode has brought to light some of the things that are doing that. Horatio, do you have anything else that you want to get out before we wrap today's show up?
Not really. I mean, just like comparing it to the environmental, I think that's going to be a huge factor. Global warming, our generation cares about that. The younger generations care about that. A few things I was like reading about was just to make a regular ball golf course, which I love saying ball golf because it makes golf players so mad.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not ball golf; it's just golf.
Nope.
So I love saying it. But you need 6 times more land to make a ball golf course as opposed to a disc golf course. You need some courses they did studies on, and you need up to 1 million gallons of water to keep a golf course green and pretty for the summer period. And with global warming, stuff getting warmer, you only need even more and more water. So I think those are 2 huge factors that people are going to see. I know 2 of the courses that were just that are they're some of the younger courses here in my town, Wichita. One of them, you go out to it and it seems kind of boring because it's pretty open, but literally they've planted over 200 trees probably because in 10, 15 years, those trees are going to be huge. And that disc golf course is going to be a ton of fun because there's going to be a bunch of tunnels, a bunch of cool shots. But as compared to a regular ball course where you have to clear out a field to make fairways and whatnot, this course they're putting in trees.
Yep.
And so I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
But no, that's all I got.
I completely agree with you on that. And I really thought that was an interesting last note you had. I can't remember the exact number, but I heard it somewhere that I'm pretty sure like 3 ball golf courses were three disc golf courses were opening comparatively to, I think I'm definitely butchering this right now, but pretty much what I'm trying to say is there's a statistic out there that I'll try to find and I'll put it on Instagram or something like that, where there's more disc golf courses being made and comparatively to ball golf, and ball golf courses, instead of more being made, they're actually closing more down because of some of those environmental impacts, people not willing to play, other things like that. So I think that's really interesting, but that is going to wrap up today's episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This was a little bit different than what we've done in the past, and hopefully you did like it. If there's some things that maybe you did like, let us know on Instagram at @ChainClankers. If there's some things you didn't like, let us know. Let us know how we can get better. We always want to get better. We always want to improve, just like we want to improve our game. If you have any feedback and you're listening on Apple Podcasts, we'd really appreciate any ratings and reviews. Let us know some topics that you want to see us cover. We got a ton of great shows lined up for you. Super excited for them, but that is going to go ahead and wrap up today's episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. For Horatio, I'm Quentin. Let's go ahead and roll that music. See ya. Thank you for listening to the Chain Clankers podcast. Make sure you follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Chain Clankers, and hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to us from so you never miss another episode.